Okay, welcome everybody today to this session. We're actually going to divide this in half. We'll have a part one and part two because I'm actually recording this later because I forgot to turn the recording on for the beginning. But I'll make sure you get all of it in two parts. But anyway, so just to begin, for those of you who are new, this is me. I'm Jeff Olafson from Staff Development Associates. This is our last session. I already know from Region 10 the plan is to do a new series next year, so we will be looking for your input on topics. So if any of you have any ideas or suggestions, by all means, contact us and let us know. And we'll be back to you, I would assume, during the summer with an update on what the dates are for next year, but we are going to do, the plan is to do another series next year. So again, for those of you who are here for the first time, let me just go over how you use the chat box. So on the top of your screen, you're going to see these three icons. You want to select the one that looks like a cartoon bubble, and this is just a picture. And when you present that, you're going to type over here, and then everybody's going to see your answer. So why don't you type in your name and what district you're from, and then we'll start. And I'll give you a second to do that. Okay, as it has been our tradition in the past, we always do a little quiz question. And today, since we're doing Excel, I thought I'd give you a quiz question about Excel. Now, admittedly, if you know the answer to this, you may be dating yourself because the fact is that, a lot of these programs are all defunct programs, and I certainly remember all of them. But just for fun, see if anybody knows this. So here's the question. So which of the following was a spreadsheet program? And I think all of them at this point are gone. Excel has so dominated the market, although it's getting a run for its money from Google Sheets. So these are kind of the older ones. But when you're ready, take a guess. That's interesting. So we have some people. Well, the answer actually is Multimate. A number of you selected VisiCalc, and believe it or not, VisiCalc was the first of the spreadsheet programs. I actually had a chance to work on it at a time when computers had those big 5 1/4 floppy drives, and there was no hard drive. It was crude, but believe it or not, a lot of the basic architecture, like cells and most of the basic formulas were in there, although you really did need to remember a lot more because there weren't really any menus. And then, of course, the dominant program for a really long time was Lotus 1-2-3 until, Microsoft kind of just ruled the world for a while, and that was the end of that. But a lot of stuff got ported from those earlier programs. So just give me a second to shut this off, and then we're going to look at Excel. And one of the things that I'm going to ask you while you do this session is if you can tell me what level you think you're at. And I recognize there's no absolute definition of what the levels are, so it's sort of self selected. But if you can just give me an idea of where you think you are, that would be helpful. So I see we have a lot of people who believe they're intermediate or would evaluate themselves to be intermediate, but we have a couple of beginners. So I am going to begin with some stuff that probably is for beginners, but we all can use a little refresh on. And then at that point, we're going to go to and looking at I promise you I'll have some topics that are good for intermediate folks and maybe even some advanced folks. By the way, just a heads up, I'd love to do more Excel next year. Excel is certainly a deep program with a lot of capabilities. So we probably will go over some stuff, and at some point we'll go a little deeper on it next year. So let me start with some basic things, most important, coolest things. So just give me a second to clear this, and we'll go over that. Okay, first item is cell fills. And so I'm just going to show you some basic cell fills. Okay, so I have one, well, I can start with even the most basic thing. So if I just write the word student, and then once I have it in one cell, if I select and put my cursor on the corner, it's going to bring student all the way down. And then I can easily just clear the contents to get rid of it. Okay, so here's another one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, all I need is really 2 numbers. And then it's going to give me a series of numbers. Okay, so let's see how smart Excel is. Okay, if I do 1, 3, will it be able to give me a series from that? And the answer, of course, is yes, it can. Just a little warning, by the way. If you're going to do like 5, 10, 15, 20, don't begin with 1. If you begin with 1, you're going to get ranges of 4 because it's separating the amount in between. Okay. So, for example, if you do 1 to 5, you may get a result you're not looking for. Okay. So make sure you begin with 0, and then you'll get the result you want. And I need at least two cells that I highlight so Excel knows what I have in mind. And then you'll get 5, 10, 15, 20. Okay. So let's see what else I can do. Okay, so if I select Monday, and here I only need 1. Okay? And I get Monday, Tuesday, I can get a series of days. If I do spell out Monday, I'm going to get. And here's an interesting one. If I do dates, it'll give me a series of dates. Okay. Let's see if we can do months. It can. Okay, so here's my favorite additional one. By the way, there's one more thing you can do with cell fills, but I'll show you that later. Okay, but here's one additional favorite of mine. Okay, if you do students, actually let's do something else besides student. Let's do invoice, number, and I do 101. Now here I have to give it at least 2, or it won't know what I have in mind. Okay, and now if I select them, so that could be invoice number, purchase order number, check number, so that can be very handy. Now, Excel is treating these as text, and yet it still can give me the number series. So this can be actually good. Certainly, I could have done it another way. I could have done invoice and then had, the numbers here. From something else before, and had 101 here, and then at that point copy down the series. But remember, I need more than 1 for it to know what I have in mind. But I think this is a little more elegant than having to have it in 2 columns. So that's it. Any questions on cell fills? How many of you were familiar with cell fills? Looks like most of you were. Okay. A few of you not. Okay, sounds good. All right. So let's go to our next item. And for here, let's just talk about how Excel handles text, okay? Because it handles text and numbers a little bit differently, and it knows it's a number if you start with a number or with a formula. Okay, so if I do the rain in Spain, it's going to truncate right into the next cell, unless there's something there. If there's something there, it'll just truncate it. Okay, if there's nothing there, it won't. Now, interestingly enough, numbers are treated differently. I'm just going to make this smaller so I don't have to have a crazy size number. You're going to get the dreaded pound signs. which is a sign that the number was too big for your cell. And it does that so you don't confuse a truncated number and think it's actually a smaller number. So it would have to be big enough to fit. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. Okay, so here's a little bit of a challenge. One thing about Excel is you can actually go, because you can do multiples of A, B, you actually can get up to 256 columns in Excel, and you can have thousands and thousands of rows. But there's a practical consideration for both of those, and that is real estate on the screen. If you have too many columns, or even too many rows, but more too many columns, you're not going to be able to fit it on one page. And even though there's a shrink to fit feature that will squeeze some stuff in, the problem is the text is going to be so small that it's not going to work. So one of the things I'm constantly working with is trying to get my widths just what I need. So if I have a date, if it's a date, I'm just going to squeeze it in so it's just the size of the date. And here's what really frustrates me in sometimes doing that stuff, which is when I get names. So let's say I've got a name, right? And I've got John Smith. I've got Mary Jones. And then I got the one that really I can't stand, Mary Jones Smith. The hyphenated name, or the extremely long name. Now, the problem is this, okay? In order to be able to accommodate that name, I've got to have my column out. So, of course, there are things I could do. I could try to go to a slightly smaller font for the one item to get it a little bit smaller, and that will work. But it wouldn't it be nice if there were a handy way to do this, and there is, okay? So what you want to do is the following. You want to select your cells. By the way, you can do this up here with format as well. Okay? And you're going to get the same menu. But the way I normally do it is by right-clicking. And you're normally going to get this. It only went to alignment because that was the previous place I was. You'll normally be here. You'll go to alignment, and you'll select shrink to fit. Now, here's the interesting thing that happens with shrink to fit. You're never going to it's never going to go larger than the font. So if the font's a 12, it'll not get bigger than 12, but it will get smaller as you shrink. So watch what happens. Notice it's taking the one number, okay, and it's taking the one item and making it smaller. So, of course, obviously, this is maybe a little too small, but, I might be able to live with this. Now, again, I could have done it by trial and error, done 10, 11, 8, but it's nice and handy to be able to do it just in one pop. Now, it was the same thing with these numbers, okay? So I'm here. So if I go and I hit Format, Shrink to Fit, it'll slightly lower. Notice how it gets bigger until it reaches the size of the cell, and then it'll get smaller and smaller, okay? So again, there is a practical limit there to how visually you could see, but this can come in handy when you're doing a report. So, for example, in this report, I've got this one item that's 130, so, and this one that's 140 that are larger than the cells, than the other by one column. So, maybe I could live with just shrinking that. By the way, you notice it's also doing it with the title as well. And even though one number is slightly smaller, I can kind of live with it. I might be able to live with it. In a big report where you might not notice the difference, whereas before I'd be getting, without it, I'd be getting, actually that was big enough, but I'd be getting my pound signs, and now with it, I won't. So again, it's just a nice choice. How many of you were familiar with that? Okay, I want to show you just one more thing. One of the things that's really important, and I learned this even in the days before there was even spreadsheets. So I'd have to admit that I worked before there was spreadsheets, which I did as an accountant. Okay, one of the things that the partners, as I was just a junior accountant at the time, said really important to keep good notation. And we did, by the way, we had spreadsheets. They were pieces of paper with a pencil with lines on them. They called them analysis pads with all the different columns. Worked the same way, except it didn't do all the calculations for you. Yuck, a lot of work. But anyway, what a life, how much life is better today being an accountant than in my early days. But anyway, we were told it's so important to keep documentation on forms. So I just want to show you how you can create a box in case you don't know that. So what you do is you're going to highlight a series of cells. You're going to do merge and center. That's just the easiest one. You're going to left justify and top and hit wrap text. What you're going to get is a text box. Now, you cannot hit an enter. If you hit an enter, it'll take you out of the box. But I can say, you know, this is the, and I can write notes to myself. This is the way you do this function. Be aware of, you know, blah, 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 whatever, blah, blah, blah. I just want to show you that's going to wrap to the next line, okay? And then I can have this in my box. If I ever decide it's too large a box, I can always unmerge. It all appears in this one box. Make the box a little smaller. Go merge and center, wrap. And the reason I'm doing all of that, left justify, I want it to start at the top of the box and then wrap. Okay, so I can also do that, and that can be extremely helpful if you want to format. Just one more thing, always nice to use some colors. So a nice idea is to change the background, so you have a background that's a different color. And maybe instead, well, this is a light enough color, so I probably would go with dark text. You know, if I start to go to a very dark color, then I'm going to want to have light text, you know, and then I'm going to want my text in white. But it just makes for a nice variety to have that, and it's very attractive. By the way, another way you can use this too is if you want to just create a little like dividing line, you just make the cell very small, and then select, you know, a cell color. You know, I wouldn't do the same one as that. I'd pick something different. Maybe green. And then I got a nice little, you know, multicolored setup there for that particular item. Okay, all right. So now we're going to go to some basic analysis. But before that, we're going to do a math problem. Okay? And so here's your math problem. What is the answer to this question? When you know the answer, write it down. Okay? And the answer is 17. So I would assume that you learned this in Texas. I know we learned in New York about, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.